Venezuela affirmed that the international hydrocarbon companies do not require licenses from third governments to operate in the country. This in view of the U.S. intention to sanction their activities. U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to bomb Iran and impose secondary tariffs as if the Persian nation does not reach an agreement with the White House on its nuclear program. And the Palestinian Red Crescent Society announced the recovery of 14 bodies of health workers. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We'll begin with the news. Stay with us. Venezuela affirmed that international hydrocarbon companies do not require licenses from third governments to operate in the country in view of the U.S. intention to sanction their activities. Through a statement, Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez informed that she maintains fluid communication with oil and gas companies affected by the sanctions, affirming that the Bolivarian Republic is prepared to comply with the contracts with these companies, respecting the Constitution and national laws. Furthermore, the text reaffirmed that international companies do not need authorization from foreign governments since Venezuela does not recognize extraterritorial jurisdiction. Also in Venezuela, a group of repatriated migrants arrived at the Simón Bolívar International Airport in Maiquetía in the state of La Guaira as part of the Return to the Homeland plan. They arrived in a U.S. aircraft as there were slight changes in logistics and procedures originating in the western country. The plane with the repatriated migrants landed on Venezuela's soil, complying with all the international protocols. Venezuelan Minister of Interior Relations, Justice and Peace, Diosdado Cabello, affirmed the plane was carrying 175 repatriated migrants after having been subjected to mistreatment and being accused of belonging to the extinct Tren de Aragua gang. And this Sunday, the American Civil Liberties Union released the Alien Enemy Law Validation Guide, which confirms that the Venezuelan migrants are detained for having tattoos and wearing clothes not for belonging to gangs or committing crimes. On the same day, a journalistic investigation revealed that the pact between Washington and San Salvador, promoted by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, had its origin in the surrender of a Salvadoran gang member nicknamed El Greñas, whose name is Cesar Humberto López Larios. This member of the Mara Salvatrucha MS-13 gang was under federal authority and accused of narco-terrorism. Rubio arranged this exchange because he apparently has information about the Bukele government's negotiations with gang members. Meanwhile, evidence of illegal deportations that amount to human rights violations continues to emerge. And on Sunday, hundreds of people marched in Punta Cana, Dominican Republic, to demand stricter measures against Haitian migrants. The demonstration was organized by the ultra-nationalist group Antigua Orden Dominicana, whose members participated in paramilitary uniforms. The group's president, Angelo Vasquez, called for a national strike to pressure the government into harsher deportation policies. Punta Cana, a popular tourist destination, is home to a significant Haitian population, many of whom work in tourism and construction sectors. Despite the tense atmosphere, there were no reports of confrontations between demonstrators and Haitian workers. On Sunday, hundreds of Chileans took to the streets of Santiago and other cities demanding the abolition of private pension fund management companies. The protests, organized by movements like No More AFP, criticized the recent pension reform signed into law by President Gabriel Boric, arguing it fails to dismantle the AFP system and prioritizes corporate interests or workers' needs. Demonstrators highlighted the ongoing pension crisis, which has left many retirees without payouts below the poverty line, and called for a complete overhaul of the system. The pension reform, approved in Congress in January and signed into law last week, introduces a mixed system with contribution from workers 10%, employers 8.5%, and a state-backed social security component.
Here are the people connected to the world of education, the residents, the health workers, and of course the people fighting for pensions. which are the four most important demands raised in the October 2019 uprising. After 5 years, we have to lament that they are worse than they were 5 years ago. That's why the fight for these demands remains fully alive, and we are here for it.
In Ecuador, a historic agreement was signed on Sunday between the Citizens Revolution movement of Luisa González, who is contesting the presidency of the country, and the Pachakutik indigenous movement, considered the third political force in the country. Details with our colleague Elena Rodriguez.
Manuel Caizalema
left his farm in Colta. For today, he is not wielding his hoe, but a flag. He arrived at the central square of Tixan, in Alausi, in the middle of the Andes mountain range. He says that he came to fight for a fair Ecuador.
We have never had help from the government. That's why we want President Luisa González to help. To facilitate life to the poor people, the farmers, the people who work.
Hundreds of farmers and workers came to this square to witness the signing of the agreement between the Citizen Revolution and the Pachakutik movement, the third political force in the country.
We as national political leaders, we are obliged to give our political criteria and our ideological position. We maintain our historical project of 1994, which manifests our anti-capitalist, anti-neoliberal position. Therefore, we will never go with the right wing. Not a single vote to the right.
This position was evident in this square adorned in multiple colors. Banners of around 75 left-wing parties and movements filled the space that served as the stage for the signing of this unprecedented political agreement.
Since Lenin Moreno's government, Lasso's government, and now Noboa's government, neoliberal policies have been applied. In the face of that, we cannot turn our backs on this country. That is why we have decided to generate a process of unity of the left.
Unity and programmatic agreement was defined in aspects such as the fight against insecurity, the elimination of large-scale mining, the reduction of the value-added tax from 15% to 12%, not allowing the privatization of strategic sectors, among others.
Today we say to the whole country, fighting for Ecuador is an act of love for the homeland, for 18 million Ecuadorians. And to love Ecuador is to take care of our peoples.
Ecuatorianos. Y amar Ecuador es cuidar de nuestros pueblos.
To take care of our people, to respect our cultures, and also to heal our wounds.
Sanar nuestras heridas, queridos hermanos.
In addition, they rejected the development of a constituent assembly as proposed by the presidential candidate Daniel Noboa. They maintain that the rights achieved in the current Ecuadorian political charter cannot be rolled back.
Con imágenes de Henry Pillajo, Elena Rodriguez, teleSUR Ecuador.
We now have a first break coming up. Remember, you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. U.S. President Donald Trump on Sunday threatened to bomb Iran and impose secondary tariffs if the Persian nation does not reach an agreement with the White House on its nuclear program. In declarations to a U.S. media, Trump said that if they do not reach an agreement, there will be bombings as never seen before. In this sense, the president also added the possibility of imposing secondary tariffs as he did 4 years ago. Washington accuses Iran of enriching uranium to develop weapons, although Iran has stressed that its nuclear program is peaceful, unlike the Israeli one. On the other hand, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian stated that Tehran rejects direct talks with the United States on the issue, pointing out that Iran keeps the door open to negotiations with the U.S. through mediators.
جوابی هم که
The response by the Supreme Leader to Donald Trump's letter was delivered to the U.S. contact in Oman by our brother, Dr. Abbas Arachi. In that response, direct negotiations have been rejected, but regarding indirect talks, Iran has always been involved in such talks, and the Supreme Leader has emphasized that indirect talks can still continue. We don't avoid talks. It's the breach of promises that has caused issues for us so far. They must prove that they can build trust. I hope this
And Donald Trump has once again floated the idea of a third presidential term despite the constitutional prohibition under the 22nd Amendment. In a recent NBC interview, Trump suggested there are methods to do it and speculated about Vice President J.D. Vance continuing his agenda if he cannot. Trump's remarks reflect his ongoing disregard for democratic norms and his willingness to entertain authoritarian ideas, building on his history of undermining institutions to consolidate power. Trump's musings on a third term come and broader fears of his authoritarian ambitions, which critics argue could further erode democratic structures in the U.S. His presidency has already been marked by efforts to centralize power, attacks on marginalized communities, and policies that prioritize corporate interests over public welfare.
I don't want to talk about a third term now because no matter how you look at it, we got a long time to go. We have a long time. You know, we have almost 4 years to go, and that's a long time. But despite that, so many people are saying, you've got to run again. They love the job we're doing. Most importantly, they love the job we're doing.
And in the U.S., auto stocks took a critical hit following President Donald Trump's announcements of permanent tariffs. Europe and Asia are the continents most affected by the significant market decline. Investors reacted quickly to the news, fearing that these tariffs could severely impact the profitability of automotive companies and lead to higher prices for consumers. Analysts also warned that these measures could further destabilize the automotive industry, as many companies rely on global supply chains and imports of parts and complete vehicles. Meanwhile, the Japanese stock indexes fell sharply on Monday morning as automakers faced mounting pressure following U.S. President Donald Trump's announcement of 25% tariffs on auto imports. Honda Motors dropped 2.6% and Toyota Motors sank 2.8% in Tokyo trading, reflecting concerns of the potential impact of the tariffs on Japan's car industry, which accounts for a significant portion of its exports to the U.S. South Korea's Hyundai Motor also fell 2.6% in Seoul amid broader market jitters ahead of Trump's April 2nd Liberation Day, when tailored tariffs on various trading partners are said to be unveiled. We now have our second and final short break coming up. Before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. On Sunday, the Palestine Red Crescent Society announced the recovery of 14 bodies of health workers. 8 of them were members of the organization, 5 were rescuers, and 1 was a UN worker, all missing since last Sunday following an Israeli offensive on the southern Gaza. They were found in the area of Tel al-Sultan, one of the neighborhoods most affected by the conflict in the city of Rafah on the border with Egypt. The organization said the bodies were difficult to recover because they were buried in sand and some had begun to decompose. In a press conference held on Sunday morning before the news broke, the society's president, Yunis al-Khatib, held the Israeli authorities responsible for the safety and lives of the medics. And the genocide against the Palestinians continues to provoke protests around the world. Some countries are repressing them, calling into question their own democratic culture. From Germany, our special envoy Yunus on air with the details.
The
Neukölln district in Berlin is home to 160,000 people, a quarter of the Muslims from Turkey and Arab countries, including Palestine. These days, their children face a challenging story in their schools.
Although it has no legal authority, the district parliament decided that a very controversial brochure would be sent to the schools in Neukölln. Particularly harsh is that this brochure, which deals with the Israeli state system, relativizes the expulsion of Palestinians, the Nakba, at least in part, very strongly as a voluntary resettlement.
The district is a center of protests against the genocide. Many demonstrations in the city, home to 250,000 Muslims, start here. The state reacts.
There is a criminalization of the protests, of the logos, of the slogans, of the symbols of these protests, and in a truly massive one-sidedness directed against the pro-Palestinian forces.
The expert says that the use of slogans in Arabic, Hebrew, or even Irish is forbidden, under suspicion of being anti-Semitic. Immigrants are required to confirm their affirmation of Israel at naturalization. Another place of repression, universities.
We have a lot of police on campus. And yes, always when there is a student protest somewhere, the university unfortunately calls the police very quickly.
The professor tells how a conference with Francesca Albanese, unspecial rapporteur for the occupied Palestinian territories, could not be held at his university because of a ban by the authorities. When the event was moved to a private venue, police in uniform and in civilian clothes were present.
For many years, there has been a working group of the various German security agencies and secret services to monitor the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. In all of these, it can be seen that the Palestinians and their supporters are seen as a threat to the moral order of the Federal Republic of Germany.
Repression does not stop with the Palestinians, experts stress.
We wrote an open letter against repression in respect of pro-Palestinian demonstrations, and also in defense of the fundamental rights at stake. It could not be published in German newspapers.
We have a great fear that this is the beginning, so to speak. Not the beginning, but one of the beginnings of an authoritarian restructuring in Germany, because it cuts across almost all political parties and currents.
Despite all the repression, hundreds of people celebrated Al-Quds Day in Berlin, as Netanyahu's genocidal policies affect political systems in the West.
Yunus Sonar, teleSUR, Berlin, Alemania.
Venezuela prepares to celebrate the International Progressive Theater Festival 2025.
El Festival Internacional de Teatro.
The International Progressive Theater Festival reaches its 4th edition this year, with a great program for all the lovers of this art in the country. Under the slogan, "Let Humanity Be Human," the event will be held from April 10th to 20th, with the participation of 26 international groups and almost 200 artists on stage from 22 countries from all continents, among them Argentina, Brazil, Burkina Faso, Cuba, Spain, Iran, Italy, among others.
Brasil, Burkina Faso, Cuba, España, Irán, Italia, Palestina, Sudáfrica y Turquía.
In addition, in this edition, Russia will be the honored nation, having the opportunity to count with the participation of the Moscow Art Theater.
If this were a festival aligned with the capitalist cultural industry, it would have joined what some cultural scenes in the world have unfortunately done. which is to cancel Russia's contribution to universal culture. Unfortunately, in the so-called developed world, there are many places where Russian music has been banned. Russian theater has been banned. The historical contribution of Russian artists in all areas has been erased, as a consequence of a political conflict.
It is an honor to have this invitation from the Ministry of People's Power for Culture and the National Theater Company of Venezuela to be present in one of the largest festivals in Latin America dedicated to theater and theatrical art.
Este próximo evento a realizarse en Venezuela.
This next event to be held in Venezuela will include activities not only in Caracas, but there will also be shows in 30 other theaters in 15 states of the country. And there will also be street theaters, circuses, and meeting points.
I believe that the festival establishes a new theatrical geopolitics that allows the country to understand and create bonds of communication and solidarity with people so different, but affectionate in human relations and theatricality.
We put ourselves at the disposal and service of all these international artists so that they can know the reality of Venezuela, which is not the reality that the media tells, as we are very distant from the truth about Venezuela. And we always put ourselves and make a platform so that these artists can perform and continue speaking well about Venezuela outside our borders.
Dentro de la programación del festival.
The Progressive International Theater Festival 2025 will feature more than 30 special training events with the participation of international guests. Bolivia will also be celebrated on the occasion of the 200th anniversary of its independence.
200 años de su independencia.
Like this, we have come to the end of this news brief, and we can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For Telesur English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thanks for watching.